James says, "Consider it full joy, my brother, when you face trials." And I'm thinking, I don't think I feel the joy. But I do understand him. And maybe I have a new appreciation for what he was trying to say in that scripture, because I do understand that if God didn't love us and take care of us, we wouldn't be going through these tests.
Good morning, Castleview. Thank you so much for joining us again on the Castleview Baptist Church podcast. And today, I've got a couple of very special guests with us. Matter of fact, we just voted in 3 new deacons, and so we've got new deacons, we've got new deacons' wives, and I thought today let's get to know maybe a couple that several of you know very well, and yet there's a lot of us that maybe don't know them that well. And I want to introduce to you today Ron and Nancy Sutton. And Ron, thank you so much. Nancy, thank you for being here this morning.
My pleasure.
And really an honor to have you guys. Now, our church would know, at least most of our church would know the name. And we often will refer back to the Sutton facility. And of course, I think a lot of them are going to be putting the name and the face together, maybe some of them for the first time right now. So I want to talk about that for just a second. We were in a school, of course, 12 and a half years or so. That's how you guys found us. Is that right? You found us in the school. And by the way, how'd you hear about our church? How far back does this go? How many years have you been at Castleview now?
You know, we've been going there, I think, about 11 years,
Has it
something
been
like
11
that.
years?
So yeah, we were still there at that school.
Wow.
And there was a person from a former church that we had been going to that had discovered you and said, "Hey, Suttons, you might like this place." And I said, "Well, where is it?" "Well, it's in a school." And I thought, "Oh, it's in a school. Oh, okay."
Was that the first? Because I will tell you, that's the first reaction of a lot of people. That matter of fact, some people told us, we're here at Castleview. We love the church, but this was the last church that we visited because we didn't want to be in a school. You kind of felt that same.
Indeed. In fact,
well, and also, you were at that time a church in a box.
Yes.
We were.
And we were
had to be.
Yeah.
We were kind of fed up with churches in the box.
Had you done that before?
We had done that.
Well, you just know how much work that
We've gone
is.
online looking for churches, and I'm not sure if we found Castleview at that point or not, but I do remember there was a church in a school. I think it was the Meadows, whatever. And I thought, oh no, they're a church in the box. And that's not really what we wanted. Yeah. But ultimately, that's where we landed, and it's just been delightful.
So, can you think back to first impressions? Do you remember what? I mean, it's been 11 years. It's been a little while.
Oh, I remember so well.
Oh,
do you really?
I do too. The one thing I remember is we walked in, and on the front row was a cadre of little boys sitting there with their little ties on. Of course, these little boys now probably have children of their own. But they were just so well behaved, and it was just such a delight to see the little boys all dressed up and being so well behaved. And then we started singing music, and the first Sunday that we were there, we joined the choir.
I remember. You know what? I remember that because we. Okay, so I do remember that. That night, we had choir practice. You guys were there right away. And then soon after that, we were having a lot of those choir practices in our basement. Do you remember that? At our house? And so you guys would come over. One of my first memories of you all also was shortly after you started visiting, we had a Christmas event at our house. And I don't know if you remember that or not, but we're in our basement, and we had, a meal, and so it was an open house. It was a Christmas open house. Yeah. Our church was the size at that time that you could have a Christmas open house at our house
in your basement. Yeah,
yes, and I remember standing in the basement talking with you all, hearing a little bit about your background, where you came from, what was kind of a little bit about who you are, and just really enjoying both of you. So, what was your first thought when you came in?
That is not my first memory. My first memory is very clear. I just remembered how welcomed we were. Oh. People were just coming up to us before service, after service, getting to know us and inviting us to come back. And they just seemed so interested. And it was so much the opposite of our previous experiences in visiting other churches, in which they were pretty much ignoring any new visitors. And this church was just the opposite. And I thought, wow, this is really a great thing. And then we had the first service, and I loved the music and I loved the teaching. It was, I don't remember your sermon. I'm sorry.
I don't either.
It was too many years ago. But when Nancy and I looked at each other and we said, this is the place.
Oh, wow.
This is the place.
Wow.
And so we each had our own impressions of that.
Yeah.
But, it was some of the churches we've been to in the past over many years since being married, living in California, living in Nevada, where our business, the company I worked for, moved us, and other places. And most of those churches were Baptist churches, but they were kind of chaotic. It was kind of like, we're going to do this service on the fly. And your services were organized well. I mean, the music fit with the sermon topics and all of that. And we just thought, wow, this is a good place.
Well,
This
good.
is a
I'm
good
glad we
place.
fooled you. Things must have worked out well
We're
that day.
still full then.
Well, we, I remember people would sometimes come to the church, and by the way, we were, and I are very, very interested in guests coming.
Yeah.
But I will say, in those days, it was a matter of survival. You remember this. We didn't have guests come every week. We could go weeks without having a guest come. I mean, it's so different now. I mean, we're spoiled now with every single week. We can have 7, 8, 9 different family units, visiting for the first time at the church. We didn't have that then. And sometimes we'd have people that would come and they would say, hey, we went to this church, this church, this church. Nobody said hello to us. And I thought to myself, how do they do that? How? I mean, you couldn't get away from us because we're going, hey, we want to be friends. We want to get to know you. Because it was almost a matter of survival.
Everybody, I mean, it probably wasn't really everybody, but it seemed like everybody was just coming up and saying hi and welcome and all of that. It was really
I
great.
love that our culture has stayed that way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even though there's
It
more
has.
people. And you could come into our church right now and hide a little bit if you wanted to. But I do hear that quite a bit still, even from guests coming in now, that, hey, the people were just so open and friendly. And I love that. I think that's a hallmark of our church is we care, not about a number, but every number has a name. And we want to get to know every person that's there. So I'm glad you remember that.
Well, if I could do a little time warp and just move into today, when I come in the service, you usually try to be there a few minutes early, and I see all kinds of people engaged with one another. I look for people who are not engaged with anybody. Usually new people, they really don't know how to fit in or whatever, and I try to go over and talk to them and introduce myself and so on. I love people.
Yeah.
I love interchange with people and getting to know them. So it's a great opportunity.
I'm glad
to do
you mentioned that
kind of-
because I really do think you get out of something what you put into it. I love it when people come early, like you all. And you don't come just to get something.
Yeah.
You're part of the church. You're part of the body, right? So you go, you're going to edify. Hebrews chapter 10 talks about provoking one another to good works and edifying each other. Well, how do you do that if you walk in as the music starts or right before the service starts and you walk out right when it's done, right? I mean, you're not really fulfilling what the church is supposed to do.
I
and
think
the other
builds
thing,
each other up doing that. So
the other thing about that is that when you come in and you seek out people that you know, and you try to find out what's been going on in their life that week, because a lot of people have issues that they come to church with, and it's sort of overwhelming to them what's been going on in their life, and they need someone to come alongside them, pray with them, encourage them, just love them. And that's what we try to do. And then you branch out and then you get to see all the new people and get to know them and get to know a little bit about them. Because you can't pray for them. You can't be a friend to them, even the ones that you know very well. You can't support them if you don't spend some time talking to them.
You're exactly right.
And we
Nancy's
only
so good at
have
this.
Yes.
we only have a few minutes beforehand and a few minutes afterwards because we're hungry when we leave.
Are you saying I preach too long? I don't want you to answer that question. No,
as a matter of fact, I think that the reason, from what I've understood from talking to people, that the church is growing is because of the kind of sermons that you preach, and that you aren't one of these mamby-pamby preachers that gets up there and says what everybody wants to hear just to tickle their ears. You tell it the way that the Lord put it into the Word and expects us to respond and to live by. And that is so important because you give us the truth.
Yeah, and you challenge us.
And you do. And that's very important. And that means so much to people because they can go into a church, which we did many, many times, and you sit there and you think, what the heck am I doing here? None of this amounts to anything, but we don't have that feeling in your church. So thank you so much.
Not in my church, in our church. Not in your church, in our church, right?
It is ours. Yeah.
Well, let the record show that's the first mamby-pamby reference we've had on the podcast so far. To your point, Nancy, so many people are coming into the services hurting over something that
Absolutely.
we don't even you don't know it, you don't think about it. We all walk in with a smile on our face. That smile is covering up burdens in every single case.
Absolutely.
Every person has something that they're battling, they're facing, they're burdened over, they're hurting. It's their children, it's their finances, it's something at work that you would never know about. Because on the outside, everyone looks like they have it all together. On social media, it looks like they've got it all together. In their surface level conversation, it seems like they have it all together. If you don't get to know people and spend time with people, you would never be able to uncover, they wouldn't be comfortable enough to be able to have those conversations.
I can't tell you how many times I've walked in and I like to hug. I'm a hugger. And so I will hug someone and they'll just almost dissolve in tears in my arms, and then we talk about what's going on.
Yeah.
And if I'm not there early, I don't get that experience.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And the freshest coffee is when you get there early too. So that's
I don't
not
like coffee.
You don't drink coffee?
Not very
How do you
much.
survive? You must be a tea person.
Sort of, yeah.
Okay,
I like
sort
tea.
of. Okay, you got to have caffeine somehow.
No, you don't want me on caffeine. Believe me.
Okay, I'll trust
Nancy
you on
and
that one.
caffeine are not a good mixture.
Well, so let me fast forward from 11 years ago. Then our church in of course 2018 we bought the land. And we were really rolling. I mean, I thought things were really looking up, and we had a lot of momentum. In 2020. Our last service before COVID, we had 227 people that day, which was a big day for us. That's bigger than normal. We were, I think, probably averaging more like 180 at the time, but we were pushing that 200. But we had over $500,000 given that day for the building. And so I thought, here we go. I mean, we are really rolling right now. Things are going so incredibly well. And it was that next Wednesday or Thursday, I got a phone call that the world was going to shut down, and it was a guy telling me my dad works at the has some dealings with the Pentagon, and everything's going to close down, and I thought, what do you mean it's going to close down? I just couldn't even. What do you mean like restaurants are going to close down? I mean, he's going grocery stores are going to close. I'm going. This isn't even. What are you talking about? And so I got off the phone and I thought either I think he may be crazy. Or maybe I'm crazy for not doing something. What do I do? And so I remember taking the boys. We went to Walmart that night. We didn't have a bunch of food in the basement or whatever. We went to Walmart. We stocked up on a bunch of, non-perishables. And just in case, that we didn't know what was going to happen. And so we went through then that very dark time at our church. I mean, I don't remember how long it was we were online. It feels like it was a couple of months. And then all the churches started coming back, right? They were letting churches gather again. Well, the school wouldn't let us gather because they didn't want the extra germs being added and this kind of thing. They were, which I understand that. They were more nervous. They have a responsibility to the kids, right? I mean, that's what they are. They're a school. And boy, if I thought it was difficult to be online services when we were all doing it, all the other churches were doing it, well, now they're going back to church and our church is online still. And that was a tough time.
The worst part was when we did it on the flatbed truck.
In a parking lot.
In the parking lot. You remember that?
And all of us in our cars. I mean, that was the worst.
It felt so strange to sit in our cars singing,
well,
right?
we were trying so hard we want to at least be able to see each other.
Exactly.
And but it was hard, right? It was.
But you know what we did? We all got out of our cars and hugged each other.
You broke the law. I know. You broke broke the rule.
With
But
no
I know
masks,
it. And it was
right?
hard. I know it was hard not to. Yeah. So we finally found a church that would let us, a non-denominational church. They had Sunday morning services, but they didn't have the evening. And so they let us meet at their church at 4:00 on Sunday afternoons. Well, that was hard.
Oh, yeah.
That was hard. Do you remember that? It was it was hard. You felt, well, there was a lot of people, frankly, that just didn't want to do that.
Well, we felt so disconnected.
We did. And I want to say I know we did. We had 2 services even there, and we weren't in 2 services before that. So we had lost some people during that time from moves and that kind of thing. We had some people not coming back yet because the 4:00 in the afternoon thing didn't really work for them for whatever reason. And then we have 2 services. And here was the worst part. Masks on, right? So you come in and you can't see people's faces. Right. And we were doing our best to respect people and because there were some people that were very sensitive about, obviously want to spread it, but there were some people that were still very scared also that we don't want to get this. So you're trying to respect all of that. We felt so disconnected during that time. So I will say that was the low. I believe that. Well, I don't believe it was. I know it was. It was the lowest season of my personal life here as a church planter. Like I would drive, I tell the church sometimes I would drive down the street and road sometimes and just weep. I mean, I'm just, thinking about the people that have left, thinking about the people that aren't coming back. And here we are just wandering the wilderness. I don't know where we're going to get a building. And I went up to a visit up in Denver. And I had a visit with this new couple that had just started visiting. And on the way home, I was having my moment of woe is me, And I called Pastor Scheller and we were talking, and he said, well, don't you have church members that have like a barn or something? I mean, something you can meet in?
Anything, right?
Anything. And I remember kind of laughing like, Pastor, you don't know. Our church, we're in Castle Rock, Colorado. We're not in the sticks somewhere. I mean, no one's going to meet in a barn. We're not going to. And so we got off the phone, and it was all of a sudden the Lord just brought back to mind. Nancy had said something about residents that were leasing from your business, the warehouse space that you have. And you had mentioned that soon there was someone that could be moving out. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Our stories are a little bit different. What's your story? Do you remember what, you were thinking you may have told me that a little bit earlier, a little bit clearer, but I didn't remember it being as clear as it was.
Yeah, I sort of told you that they were going to be leaving and that this would open up and that the church could come in there and that I felt strongly that you will eventually be there.
Be there, yeah.
And you... It's too small, not enough parking. You had 51 million reasons why we couldn't do it.
Now, that's not true. That's exaggeration. So is that while we were still at the school? You were telling me that?
No.
It was after COVID started.
Yeah, it was during COVID.
See, and it's so funny. I do remember you telling me that your people may be moving out.
Yes.
But I think at that time it may be, I'm not sure. And so in every building we'd come across before, parking was always the issue. Mm-hmm. Of course, the Lord worked it out that there was that surgical center across the street from your place it felt like your parking. It was right there. And so it worked out perfectly. So I'm driving home and the Lord brings it back to my mind. Oh, you know what? Nancy said that there could be a potential of that opening it up. And so I called that evening, didn't I? I called that night, talked with you, Ron, for a minute.
Yes.
And you said, you know what? They just moved out. Like how long before that? It was not long.
Not long at all. Maybe 2 weeks at most. It's a little foggy in my mind as to what
I was going to say 2 weeks is what I thought it was. Yeah. Well, I think about that and I think, well, the Lord, just earlier we couldn't have done anything about it anyway. They're in it, but all of a sudden, so I said, can we meet in the morning?
Yeah.
So I think I came at 9 the next morning. We met. We walked around that warehouse space. And I think within about 10 minutes, we're saying, can we use it? That'd be amazing. Can we do this?
I remember you said, now, how big is this? Because you had remembered when the other business was in there, it was hard to tell what the size was.
That's right.
And
I think that was part of the issue when we talked too, because it's walled up and you've got all the shelving and everything. You didn't know how large it was. When I went and saw you, it was open.
Yeah, and I do remember you asked how big it was. I said it was 4,000 square feet, and you said, "Wow."
Yeah.
Well, gee, at the school we only had 3,000 square feet. Of course, that also had some extra rooms and things as well.
Sure,
But
sure. Yeah.
that I think that was one of the pieces that kind of started to turn the whole thing around. And then we started looking at other parts of the building that, we had a kitchen there and other hallways and other things that could be used for classrooms and so on. It was awkward, but
it was cute because we had,
fun.
it's a great memory, right? That we have children's class in a hallway. You know what I mean? It's kind of a neat memory that, this is,
great.
we had the lobby, we had classes in the lobby. We had classes we had nursery in your office space.
Right.
We had to kind of wall over things. And to your all's credit, I just thought that was so kind. It's not easy to have a church in your facility, right? I mean, it's not easy because I know what happens. I know people move things. I know things don't always get put back just right. And I mean, we're literally using your office space to be able to put babies and children. And to your credit, you guys were so incredibly gracious and kind during that whole time.
Well, we expected things like that. It was just it's people, like you said, and people do those sorts of things. Quite frankly, it was better than I thought. In past churches we've been to, when there's a group that comes into the church, they go into the kitchen, they mess everything up, they don't know where everything goes, and so they're doing all kinds of crazy things, and it's just a mess. Sure. That never happened.
Yeah.
Never happened.
Everyone was so
we
so
were
kind to follow it was up to me to set the rules, which I did.
Yep. Sure.
And they were so cooperative. Yeah. And they tried to make sure that everything was done just the way that we had asked, except for you.
What did I do?
We walked in one day and you said, okay, we got to fill up all the holes in the walls where they pulled off all the shelves.
Right.
And we got to paint the walls.
Yeah.
And we got to wall off this one door that goes into an area where they weren't allowed to go into.
Uh-huh.
And then there was a makeshift office over in the corner.
I remember this office.
Yes.
And you began ripping that down.
I don't remember it just like that.
Yes. And you told me, and I said, I'm not sure we can do that without notifying the town. And you said, I believe in asking for forgiveness rather.
I don't remember this conversation at all.
I do. Because I was the one that the town came after.
Well, it needed to go.
Yes.
It was right in the way.
It did.
And
but we should have asked for permission. And you said,
I don't remember
I
that
believe
conversation.
in asking for
Here's what I do
forgiveness
remember this
instead of
part. I do
permission.
remember that it was an added room. It wasn't part of the original building.
It was not.
So I do remember feeling very confident that if it didn't exist and it wasn't part of the structure, it doesn't have to be here. They just kind of built it for themselves.
That's probably correct.
You should be thankful that I had a really good relationship with the fire chief.
I do remember that. And
otherwise, I don't know what we'd have had to pay a fine or something at least. But.
Well, you know what? The Lord was, Joshua took some big steps of faith too, didn't he? And didn't Moses have to take some big steps? And that was mine right there. Was we're gonna tear down this wall. So we had a good time with that for sure. One of my favorite memories was, a couple of them that I think of when I think of your space. One of them was when we sat down with your CEO, and of course CEOs do what CEOs do. They're going to make sure that everything is. I'm saying CEO, is it CFO?
CFO.
CFO. Okay.
Yes.
You guys are in charge, but CFO. He's going to do what he does, right? Sure. He's going to make sure that all the contract is right, and that the church is going to bear the brunt of any liabilities and all these kind of things. Obviously, he's got to make sure the business is taken care of and financially and all that. That's his job. Yeah. And he'd say, "All right, the church is required to," and Ron would say, "Actually, we're not going to make him do that." And he'd say, "Okay," and he'd cross that out, and then, well, we're going to have you do, and you guys would be like, "No, we don't really, we're not require that." And by the time we were done, we were going to end up just paying for whatever utilities, whatever you had to pay for that really was coming from us, right? And I'll never forget you coming. 3, 4, 5 weeks after we started there, it seems like, you guys coming in and going, you know what? We don't even want to worry. Don't even pay that, right? We want to take care of all of it.
Yeah, we were embarrassed quite frankly, to take anything from the church because we had gotten so much out of it. I mean, the fact that the other business had moved out and church was in there, we had gospel music coming through the walls during the week as people were practicing.
Instead of all the cuss words that we were hearing
from the
before.
former residents,
Yes.
right? Sure,
They were not the best and so on. But yeah, you know, God blessed us so much. I mean, literally within the first, I don't know, 2 months or something like that, maybe a little longer than that, our business jumped almost 50%.
Wow.
I mean, it didn't ramp up, it leaped up. And we just thought, wow, this is amazing, amazing.
One of my favorite memories is seeing you two. It was early on, and I think the musicians were getting ready, maybe the choir. I don't remember who it was, but I think it was the musicians getting ready for the day, and service getting ready to start. And there was just a lot of, energy in the building, and that size. All of us under one service, we started to grow again, and it really. And just you two staying in the back and almost like, you were misty,
yeah,
and almost like proud grandparents that I just love, having, and you guys kind of say that we just love having. We can't believe the church is here.
I took pictures of that. It's just a sweet memory for sure.
Yes.
I got to tell you an interesting little background here. Just to digress just a moment. Before the church came, in fact, you were talking about our CFO and so on. Right after that other business moved out, I mean, within a few days, unbeknownst to me, our CFO put a sign for rent on that building, on that section of the building, that 4,000 square feet, hung it up so people driving by on the interstate could see it. Uh-huh. And I saw it. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, we were getting like $10,000 a month for that. We're going to be missing that kind of income. I'd like to see if we can get somebody else to come in and replace that." And so we actually had two different businesses come take a look at it that I may have been more, but those are, and both of them said, well, we can't do it unless we get at least 5 years of time because, we're going to take the time and money to go in there and establish our where we are, et cetera, with a public and so on. And I just said, well, 5 years, I think we're going to need that space within 6 months to a year.
Wow.
And so we can't do that. And so that kind of released it then. Wow. And then that kind of timing was just amazing. And then
I don't know if I realized that.
Yeah, right after that is when you took a look
that.
at that.
Wow.
Yeah.
You, and I've told our church this, you guys saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That's amazing.
We were there 3.5 years. One of the big things that changed also being there, it was the first time having that a little bit more stable location than a school. I know it's still a little bit mobile. It's not exactly having your own facility, but it was more stable than a school. We could set up. We could do our things throughout the week. We had more exposure. It was, for the first time, there wasn't a single, in 3.5 years, there was not a weekend that we did not have guests there. And so we really were able to start growing again back in that space. And it really was the perfect launching pad for us to be able to grow our base, our people that were part of it and excited about moving forward in the other space. And it probably was perfect because we did have to do ministry a little bit differently there. We couldn't have as many life groups as we'd love to have. We couldn't have all the activities throughout the week or on Sundays we would love to have had. So it was perfect in that we had a great space to be able to worship. We could do a few of the things we thought were really important, but church, we can't stay here forever. And it was good because you guys, hey, we're going to need this space too. So, you can't stay here forever either. We're gonna want to move in there at some point too.
Yeah, I do remember driving by the building on the interstate because it's right overlooking the interstate, and there was a very prominent sign, the Castle View Baptist Church, right there.
Yep.
And I think a number of business visits from people, they were confused because they were looking for our laboratory, and here's this church
that came in and took over that sign.
We had no signs,
right.
Being a testing laboratory for pharmaceutical products.
Yeah. You don't need the public just to walk into your building.
No, we don't. And we were, we were somewhat concerned that people might say, "Oh, there's drugs in here," and break in and things of that sort. So we really didn't want to have our name prominently on the building. So the church was very prominent.
It was. Most people probably did think we had just had the building, right? The entire place, if they didn't know.
Yeah, and I think we occasionally would witness people coming for the church service, and they didn't know which door to come in, and they were coming in the side door because that looked like the main door, right?
Right.
But then we had to sometimes direct them around, so a little confusing. But very fond memories of all of that.
I did too.
I do too. God just blessed the church. God blessed us. Yeah. Just an amazing experience.
That leads into something that I really wanted to cover this morning. You are doing the trending series, and I cannot tell you how important that is. People need to know the relevance of God's word and God's dealing in our lives every day. And every week there's something that happens in the news that shows, demonstrates God's love, God's provision for us. And I had a premonition before the church left that when the church left, the blessing would leave, because we were growing like crazy and couldn't wait for you to get out of there. And as soon as you left, all of a sudden, our business tanked. And this week...
So come back.
This week, there was an airplane, which I'm sure everybody knows about, that was landing in Canada. And through a whole series of circumstances, it ended up on the tarmac upside down. And right now, our plane is upside down.
Meaning our business.
Meaning our business and in our life as well. And the lights on the floor that guide you to the exit, they're not working. And we're trying to climb out of this airplane that's upside down, and we're on the ceiling, and we're running into these obstacles, which are the exit lights, which are supposed to be hanging down from the ceiling, and instead they're sticking up in our way on the floor, which is not really the floor, but we hear the people outside the plane, and they're encouraging us, and these are the people in the church that are praying for us, and they're saying, come on, you can do this. We've got you. You're good. You're going to make it. And yet we don't see how we can't see the door. We can't see the exit. We don't know how to get out of this. And yet at the same time, it's as though Jesus is there, and he's telling us, come on, you can do this. I know where we're going. You don't know, but I do. Watch out. There's an obstacle here you have to step over. Another one of those exit signs upside down. And we are trying to get to the door. And Jesus is leading us, and the church is supporting us. And that just hit me so much when I saw that plane upside down. That's what we're going through.
We're at right now.
Yeah, as our business is really struggling.
It's been a struggle. So
and it was just so comforting to me to know that the church is there for us, and that Jesus is leading us through this terrible situation of being upside down.
Because that can really shake your faith. Like, Lord, I don't understand. I mean, we have, even with our business, not just our lives, we're not just faithful to go to church on Sundays. And, we literally gave up quite a bit of financial income we could have had to have our church here. I mean, we're not just saying we're believers. We're not just, attending a church. No, we are actively invested in part of our church. We're doing everything we can to honor you with our lives and to invest the best way we know how. It's disturbing in ways, right? When something like that happens. Like you did tell me, Pastor, I'm afraid that when the church leaves, the blessing of God will leave. And I said, Nancy, that's crazy. That's not how God works. It's not going to happen that way.
And who was right again?
No. Well, so I want to get to this for just a moment, because don't we all have moments of our lives that are like that? I mean, put yourself in Joseph's shoes, right? I mean, Joseph, we don't know anything negative about anything he did. Now, we could argue that maybe discernment wasn't his greatest quality when he was younger, right? Like, why do you keep telling your brothers these dreams, right?
Yeah.
They don't like to hear about this. But he's faithful. He's sold. He's faithful again. He's lied about. He's faithful again. He's forgotten. Just over and over and over again. And it's not that God was not there, and it's not that God had forgotten about him, and it's not that God didn't have good plans for him. It was part of that entire plan, right? And at the very end of it, I love in Genesis 50, and I think it's verse 20, where he says to his brothers, you meant it evil, but
God meant it for good.
He did. God had a plan this entire time. So let me ask you two, I'll put you on the spot here a little bit then. How do you get through those I don't understand days? Like, God, we have been faithful. I mean, why do I feel like Job right now? I mean, we've done, we're not perfect. I mean, there's not a perfect person outside of Jesus that's walked this earth, but we generally have really tried to do what you've asked us to do. What do you do with that?
Yeah. It's, we've gone through a series of emotions. Our faith has never, ever wavered. Not a bit. It's been challenged. It's been rewarding in the sense that it has drawn us, I think, closer to the Lord.
And closer to each other.
Nancy and I have spent more time in prayer together as a result of what we're going through. It's clearly a test. God is taking us through this. We know there's a reason for it. In fact, that's a part of, I think, our prayer continuously is, Lord, we don't like this. It's not comfortable. We don't understand fully. We're not really sure what we're supposed to do, but we have faith in you that there's a purpose in this, that this, as James says, there's always a reason for the test to make us, if you will, perfect, is how he finally concludes
mature,
that.
sure.
Complete and perfect. And so we anticipate all of that. It's been a struggle periodically for me in my prayers to just say, Lord, thank you for the test. We're supposed to do that. We're supposed, he says, James says, consider it full joy, my brother, when you face trials. And I'm thinking, I don't think I feel the joy, but I do understand him. And maybe I have a new appreciation for what he was trying to say in that scripture, because I do understand that if God didn't love us and take care of us, we wouldn't be going through these tests. He cares enough about us to put us through these times of trial and testing to perfect us. And through all of this, and it's been over a year, right, that we've been going through this. And I keep praying, Lord, tell us what to do. And I finally got to the point where I was convinced that when I didn't hear God telling me, and I'm thinking, I have had experiences in the past where I literally heard God's voice when we first started our original business way back many years ago. And that was a wonderful experience that he was telling me kind of what to do. And then I've also experienced times in which God's direction came as a result of just events. This door opened, if we could put it that way, that door closed, and things of that sort. That wasn't happening here. And I finally got to the point where I thought, when heaven sounds like brass, that's God's trusting us. I think we have a point. I don't know if I can say this correctly, but I think when we get to the point where our Father knows where we are, and he said, I'm going to be quiet. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to lead you in the way that you want. I want this to be a growing experience. And I think just if I were a father and I had a son and I was trying to get him to do something and he wasn't doing it, eventually I'd think, okay, he knows what to do. I've told him. I'm just going to stand back and
right
wait.
Here.
I'm just going to stand back and watch. And I sort of feel like that's where we are. God trusts us, and we are, we're growing, but through all of this, and we're confident that he's got a purpose in all this. And on the other end of this, probably everything will be even better than ever before. That's my belief.
And I also think that as we are going through this, he's used it to grow our faith, some of our employees' faith, our family's faith, because we can see, like in the upside-down airplane, Jesus leading us through the pathway to the exit, going over all of these obstacles. There have been times when we didn't think we were going to make payroll until the day before we had to turn it into the payroll company. And God provided. Suddenly we got a check from a customer or something happened where we were able to make the payroll.
You were able to see a little bit deeper in, both of you have kind of mentioned this then, Romans 8:28-29 really is okay. You just said our faith is deeper, our family's faith is deeper. Well, that's God can bless you with an abundant business, right? God is generous. I mean, He is good to us. He can provide our needs, and He does and even a lot of our wants, through a great business and an advancing business. But the ultimate plan He has for our life is even we can rejoice in the trials we go through. And when you get to Romans 8:28-29, because the verse 29 there is to be conformed into the image of His Son. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when things are just going perfectly, it's not normally the times of growth in business that are the times of growth spiritually. It's not normally the great times in any area of life that tend us to grow the most spiritually. It's those valleys sometimes, right? That you stop and you say, all right, Lord, I need you. You got my attention. I'm right here. Teach me the lessons you want to teach me. Nancy, you said something interesting. You said while he was talking that it's also grown you two closer. That's interesting because a lot of times challenges will push you apart, right? They can grow you closer, but a lot of times people react. The pressure comes in, and you're feeling it, and now you're a little short with each other. And it causes you're blaming each other for whatever decision happened in the past. How did you let it actually bring you closer than push you apart?
Because we realized we couldn't do this on our own. God gave Ron an absolutely amazing ability to understand things about science, and He gave me an ability to understand things about people and human emotions and things of that nature. And we needed both of those in order to get through this. We needed his business abilities, and we needed my support to be able to support for both of us to get through this. We couldn't have done it on our own. And if we had fought each other, then the whole thing would have fallen apart.
Yeah. What's the point? What's the purpose of fighting with each other?
It's counterintuitive to everything that you're trying to do.
Sure.
We're turning our lives inside out and upside down, trying to figure out what have we done? What do we need to change? And, I can't fault him when I've got my own faults, and he can't fault me when he has his own faults.
Sure, he can.
Not that he has that many. But anyway, it would have been counterintuitive to fight with each other. It drew us closer because the bond was there in the first place, because we've been married for a long time.
She's not mentioning numbers, is she?
It is interesting to watch because you all are very different personalities.
Oh, yeah.
You're very different.
Yeah.
And that is not a weakness in your relationship.
No,
it is an incredible strength in your relationship.
Yeah.
And we talked about this not long ago, that we're better together. Ron is an incredibly patient man. He is brilliant. Obviously, we just talking with him, that. You're highly intelligent too. You wouldn't be able to be together if you weren't. You've got to match each other with that. But Ron is incredibly patient. Incredibly kind. I could see you as a leader in the company you've got a longer fuse than most and you can kind of take,
It's
and
true.
You know what? People can take advantage of that at times.
Yes.
Nancy, you are business and you have that. Now, don't get me wrong. You've got that grandmotherly sweetness that people love and that you'll come alongside of. And when they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, you're a very loving person. But you also have a part of you that goes,
it can be the heavy.
Let's do that. Hey, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
What are we waiting around on? Why are we? No, we're not going to put up with that. You get this done. Well, if both of you are like you, then you're probably a little hard as a couple, right? It's a difficult place to work. If both are like you, then you know what? Sometimes people aren't going to get the job done the way they should. It really does take two people that say, okay, we're not going to let this push us apart. We actually need each other. And let's not let our differences be what frustrates us here in this relationship.
And I think at another level, going through all of this, and as I said, Nancy and I have had many, many conversations, praying in the evening before going to bed, sometimes praying in the morning and so forth. And there have been times when I was just feeling really low, like, I don't know where this is going. We look like on the brink of bankruptcy month after month after month. And at those lowest points, Nancy has come along to encourage me. And I just feel, that I just feel that support from her at those times, that, that would have been a good opportunity for a husband and wife to start fighting with one another, like you're doing this. But no, it's just the opposite. She was supporting me during those times. And I think probably I supported her when she was feeling the lowest. And that helped us to support. So it kind of embellishes, I think, the point you're making here about opposites supporting one another and actually filling the gaps of one another, so we become whole and more complete as a result of that. So that I think that, to me, that's what has helped us to draw together and support one another. Is just that consistency. And every just recently again, Nancy said, "Don't worry, God's got this." And I thought, yes, thank you.
How many years have you been married now? Are you allowed to say?
Yes. I was married when I was 3. Almost 58 years.
Almost 58 years.
I was wondering if she was going to say the number.
Almost 58 years. Wow.
We're not even that old, right?
Yeah, right. Well, let me tell you that there's honor in that. A lot of people don't make it, a fraction of that. And so to be married 58 years, that's 58 years of grace. And it's 58 years of patience, and it's 58 years of learning each other. It's 58 years of forbearing and overlooking and all of that. If you had to give a young couple in our church advice, young couples sometimes can, you've not got much mileage under you a little bit, so you can get frustrated a little easier. You maybe overreact a little faster. If you had to give a young couple that was facing some pressure right now in their marriage, you have any advice? What would you say to them?
It's interesting you ask that, because over the Christmas time period, we had to go to a conference. Actually, it was a trade show in Las Vegas, and we had a booth there, and people would come by, and they would talk to us, et cetera, et cetera. And there was a man that showed up, and he had on a turban, and he was dressed in kind of a colorful robe, and obviously not from this country. And we were standing in the booth, ready to talk to the customers as they came. And he walked by us, and then he stopped, and he said, "Okay." Now, how he knew that we were married is one thing.
You can kind of see that, I think.
But he stopped and he looked at us and he says, "Okay, what advice do you have for young people who are newly married or want to get married?" Well, I mean,
that's an interesting question at a trade show.
Really?
Right.
I had
show,
nothing to do with anything that was going on there.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I said, "Well, and here he is in this, obviously not a Christian. I mean, he's got on all this apparel that contradicts everything that we would think of as a Christian." And I said, "Well, a couple of things." I said, "First of all, you never let the word divorce in your vocabulary. You figure out a way to solve the problem. And you will figure out a way to solve the problem. Yeah. And your marriage is a triangle: God, husband, and wife. And as long as you keep that triangle in balance, you'll work out the issues. You'll find the happiness that keeps you going. It's just the solution that you need." And he looked at me and he said, "That's very interesting." Now, I don't know why the guy was there. I don't know anything about him.
Yeah.
I don't know how that affected him.
Yeah.
But what I told him is what I would tell anyone. In fact, we've told our children this. We tell our grandchildren this. Oh, and I have the most perfect grandchildren in the whole world. But we tell them that you do not let the word divorce in your vocabulary. You figure out how to solve the problems. There's going to be problems.
There's going to be problems.
And there's going to be times that you want to throw up your hands and say, good grief, how could you be so dumb?
Is she talking about me?
You're well, you're the only one she could be talking about, I think, at this moment.
And at the same time, you realize that those are hurtful words, and those are not going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And what you need to do is you need to stop, listen to the other person. You need to reevaluate what you have said and your attitude and say, okay, let's find the solution to this.
Yeah.
And then if you keep that triangle in balance of God, husband, and wife, and in that order, not any other mix-up, it will work out, and you will find those solutions, and you will find the path forward. And when you get on the other side, it's so much more glorious than where you started.
Yeah, that's good. That's good advice.
I have a funny story to tell that kind of relates to this.
Now that she called you out, let's hear your funny story.
I'm going to start this, but I'm going to let her finish this. I think she knows where I'm going with this. Early on in our marriage, I think we were maybe married a year, maybe even less than that. We had our first fight. It was a kind of intense disagreement about something. I have no idea what it was, typically. But I was trying to convince her of something. And she was giving her point of view, and I was giving my point of view. And I finally, out of exasperation, I said, but you're not being logical. Let's be logical. And what did Nancy say?
I don't have to be logical. I'm a woman.
I'm a woman. I knew that. I knew you were going to say that.
And we both cracked up.
That is funny. And by the way, that's at the root of part of the reason that we're different. I mean, God created us differently, and we've got different ways of seeing things. But if we just abandon logic, then life is not great. If we abandon emotion, life is not great, right? I mean, we've got all these things that are working together.
Yeah, we do. But shall I say that was the only fight? That's the only one I ever remember that we actually had disagreement on, because after that we kept remembering that event, and we just start cracking up even on other occasions. But we've talked, we talked to each other, and we deal with things. I do remember as we were starting to raise our children, they were very small, and kind of like you pointed out, my personality, I'm kind of easygoing and kind of lenient. Nancy's more the disciplinarian by nature, although that's supposed to be my job. So there were times in which, I would be away at work and she would be at home with the kids and so on. And she had disciplined them in some way, and she wanted me to support that. And I wasn't sure I agreed with what she was doing and saying. So we had to go
It was harder than you would have done it because it's different personalities.
Exactly, but we had to go off kind of away from the kids and have this discussion about we need to be consistent together in how we handle these things and the rules and regulations of our children growing up and so on. And of course, they change as they grow older. And so we had to kind of set that standard. Once we did that, I think those kinds of disagreements began to kind of melt away.
Is a big part
because I saw things from a different standpoint than she did. And our backgrounds were different too. I was raised, I cannot remember a time in my life that I wasn't going to church. Very different from Nancy. Nancy did not have that kind of home life. And so she had a different perspective based on that. And together, maybe we kind of met a middle ground there.
Sure.
And it has worked out well.
Yeah. Debbie and I would be the same with that, where she would be the more actively engaged. I think I mentioned it Sunday. Hey, we're losing them. And just more sensitive to the heartbeat and the pulse of where the boys were at when they were small. And I could have the tendency of, hey, everything's great. There's no problem. I'm just out doing my thing, and she would be that disciplinarian more too, and I would be a little more patient. But I think sometimes you come together and you're better together by the time it's all done.
Just to reinforce what you're saying there, we had been married maybe 5 years, and we were living in Reno, Nevada, and we had just adopted our precious little baby girl, and he had a job that caused him to travel constantly. I mean, he would come home for the weekends, and then he's off and gone again. And I'm at home with the children all the time. Plus, I'm working, and it was really difficult. And it just really felt like he had abandoned me, and
I was clueless. I was enjoying my profession.
He had no idea what was going on in my mind.
Yeah.
And one day I had just reached a point, and I said to him tearfully, please stay with me until the children are grown. I don't think I can raise them by myself. Well, you could have knocked him over with a feather, and he had no idea that was what was going on. Well, eventually that culminated in us moving to Massachusetts, where he had a job where he didn't travel so much. But the point is that because he wasn't coming from the same place I was, he wasn't seeing things the same way I was, we had to spend some time talking about that. And he was shocked that I would even suggest that he was going to leave me. But I had come from a background where, and my mother was constantly telling me this, well, he's on the road all the time, and you know what those salesmen are like that are on the road. You really think that he's being faithful to you? So I had all of these, mixed messages going on. And I was trying to deal with those. And so we had to spend some time and together figure out exactly how each person was thinking, overcome the obstacles that we were facing, and realize that our love was stronger than any of these problems and any of these issues that Satan was throwing at us.
Yeah. It's a great, your love was stronger. And it's what you desired. We got married for a reason. We love each other. We're going to work it out. And let's communicate. Let's forgive. Let's just keep working it out. And,
if I could just interject a little bit, just to kind of cover this a little bit, from my perspective, I had always been, grown up with the idea that the husband is the breadwinner, and you go out and you do whatever it takes to advance in your career and make more money and all that sort of things. That's what I was doing. I was thoroughly enjoying it, and I thought that she understood that, and she looked at it from the same perspective.
Sure.
So I was doing well. I started as a grunt at this little scientific instrument company that was in California that moved us to Nevada, and I started there, but I ended up basically being the international sales manager, marketing manager, and so on. I had done tremendous things for the company. It grew and grew and grew as a result of the efforts I was putting into it. I felt very satisfied with that, and I thought that I was fulfilling her desire for a husband that supplied the needs of the family and so on, not realizing that my absence from her while she was raising the kids and working part-time as a nurse and so on was doing what it was doing to her.
Yeah.
And in fact, kind of a funny little story to emphasize this as well. There was a time in which I was coming back from a flight to Chicago or wherever I was, and landed in Nevada there at the airport. This is before all the security stuff. So people were allowed to come to the gate, So there was our son David, and then there was our adopted daughter Laura, who was about 3 years younger. And Laura was maybe 3.
She was 2.
2, something, young. And they came to the gate, and our daughter looked at Nancy and said, "Now, what's his name?" And Nancy looked down and she said, "Daddy."
Wow.
And Laura said, "Oh, Daddy." It broke my heart.
Wow.
And I think it was right on the spot, or maybe after a short discussion with Nancy, I realized I need to change jobs.
Yeah.
The company was enjoying my what I was doing for them, but my family was my kids were growing up not even knowing, and I didn't realize it. I was coming home, I was playing with them, I thought everything was fine. But
I think that's probably part of the reason you guys have been
huge.
so successful too, though, is because, what's the most important thing?
Yeah.
I've got, you mentioned a minute ago, it's God, husband, wife. And I've got to make sure the family is taken care of, and she feels secure and she's supported, and we can, it's not just one person always giving up their preferences or their desires or their career path or whatever. It's two people coming together. You guys are really interesting people. Thank you. I'm excited about working with you, moving forward.
yeah.
And I just feel like there's so much wisdom you all have to be able to help and encourage people in our church too. Thank you for the sacrifice you made for our church, since you've been here, but those 3.5 years in the building were just pivotal years for us. The Lord used those years there to get us where we are now, and there's just no way around it. So we thank you for that. We're very thankful for your generosity to us, and thank you for being willing to serve as a deacon, and thank you for being willing to help us in this role. You've got a lot of wisdom that you get to bring to the table, and our church will be better for it this year. So thank you for joining me today and just having a few minutes of conversation.
Thanks for those comments.
Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Castleview, thank you for watching today. I just think a really excellent conversation. A lot of things. How do you go through a difficult time? What do you do? And then marriage. I think there's a lot of nuggets in there for any marriage, young marriages certainly, but any marriage. I think that'd be super helpful. God's blessed our church with some wonderful people, and the Suttons certainly are in that category. And I'm thankful for all of you for watching today, and we'll plan on being back again next week. Thanks for listening today. We will see you again next week.